A framework for peace agreed, but will it be enforced and can it be sustained? The U.S. and Iran are set to sign a deal on Friday, but with so many false starts and Israel not included in negotiations, will we truly see an end to the violence? And will traffic resume in the Strait of Hormuz? I'm Andrea Sankin. Today's Newsmaker is the U.S.-Iran deal. Well, it's meant to be the breakthrough that finally leads to peace in the Gulf. But to quote an overused expression, the devil is in the details, and those details are still unclear. From whether Israel will agree to stop its attacks on Lebanon to what will happen with Iran's nuclear program, the potential spoilers are many. Still, the stage is set for Friday in Switzerland, where Iran and the U.S. will finally sign something to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and stop military assaults on Iran, Gulf nations, and Lebanon. Here's a look.
A war that pushed the Middle East to the brink may finally be nearing an end. After 108 days of fighting, the United States and Iran say they've agreed on a framework deal designed to end the hostilities. The first announcement came from the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, whose government, alongside Qatar, facilitated indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. The announcement signals an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. It also says the framework will be formally signed in Switzerland on Friday. Until then, mediators will oversee a series of meetings to lay the groundwork for future negotiations. Washington and Tehran later confirmed the agreement. If implemented, it would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway whose disruption helped trigger a global energy shock during the war. The framework is also expected to launch a new round of talks on Iran's nuclear program, while addressing issues including sanctions relief and frozen Iranian assets.
If the Iranians comply with this deal, it is going to fundamentally transform the Middle East for the next 50 years. It's going to end the war. It's going to make the Middle East more investable. It's going to mean a lot of prosperity, lower energy prices for the American people. This region of the world has been a basket case for my entire life and longer than that. And what the president has really set us to do is to certainly eliminate the nuclear threat of Iran. That's done.
For many in Iran, the prospect of peace is welcome. But there is also caution after years of tension and mistrust between Tehran and Washington.
The end of any conflict should be peace. It may not be pleasant for both sides, but nations need peace and tranquility. And I hope the United States will adhere to this agreement that was reached, because we have not seen any good promises from them so far.
But the agreement faces an immediate challenge. Israel has yet to endorse the agreement, and some ministers have already rejected it. That could complicate one of the framework's central provisions. Iranian officials say the deal would bring military operations to an end across all fronts, including Lebanon. Yet Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says troops will remain in security zones in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza indefinitely. The gap between what Tehran says the agreement covers and what some Israeli officials appear willing to accept is already raising questions about how the deal would be enforced.
We are not optimistic at all. The deal seems very fragile. Netanyahu will not comply with Trump or withdraw from southern Lebanon. That's how we all see it.
The agreement marks the most significant breakthrough since the war began. But ceasefires are signed on paper and tested on the ground. Whether this framework becomes a lasting peace may depend not on the negotiations still to come, but on whether all sides choose to honor them.
So will an agreement be finalized and ultimately honored? Joining me now to debate that and more are from Tehran, Assistant Professor of West Asian Studies at the University of Tehran, Elham Kadkhodaee. From Grenoble, France, Director of the Middle East Treaty Organization, Emad Kiyaei. And from Washington, Republican political strategist and director of global affairs at Nestpoint Associates, Tim Phillips. Thanks all so much for being with me. Elham, I'll start with you in Tehran. And from an Iranian perspective, are people feeling positive about these developments? Do they trust that they'll actually see an end to this conflict?
Well, I think there's all sorts of different and mixed kind of emotions among the Iranians. In some sectors of the society, you see relief that is mixed with skepticism. And on the other side, you see people who are so much pessimistic about any kind of deal with the Americans and believe that this is going to be just a kind of an introduction to a new round of war. So I think it's, people are very much hesitant to be, to be able to express any form of pleasure or happiness about what's going out. And everyone is aware that this is just, a very, very kind of a brief 2-page memorandum of understanding, not a real deal. And many things could go wrong. There are so many things that could happen. But still, as I said, there is a kind of a level of hesitant relief among Iranians.
Hesitant relief. Well, an introduction to a new round of war is a little less optimistic. Emad, let me ask you, there are still 5 more days to this signing, and then 60 days beyond that to negotiate a fully binding agreement. So what are the biggest real vulnerabilities for us to keep our eyes on over here? The next 5 days and then the 60 beyond that.
Well, it's going to be a very long 5 days, I can imagine, simply because even prior to the announcement by President Trump and right following it, we saw that the biggest obstacle that continues to be for these talks is the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, who continued to assault with its strikes on Lebanon and did not even seem to care what Trump has been saying, that they should all hold off. So I think the biggest sort of spoiler continues to be the Israeli government, because they see that any rapprochement between Iran and the US and any agreement that will result in a more comprehensive understanding between the two sides would be at its cost. And mind you, the Israeli Prime Minister has been betting on the Iranian card for many years for its own political survival. And it has used up, I believe, as much as it could, this Trump card that it was holding. And with any further peace agreement or any form of normalization between the US and Iran in the long run, it will be a huge cost to the Israeli government and, by extension, Netanyahu.
Tim, how much is that the view from Washington as well, i.e. those who are truly concerned that the Trump administration no longer really has any control over Israel, and then that could prove the spoiler in attaining actual peace here?
I think there is deep understanding within the Trump administration and the president himself that Israel has been repeatedly attacked by the terrorist proxy groups that Iran controls and leads and pushes, like Hamas and Hezbollah. So I do think there is a patience with Israel and with the prime minister, because they understand that Israel has been repeatedly attacked in the most vicious, vile ways by these terrorist groups that Iran sponsors. So I think the reservoir of goodwill and understanding is deeper than perhaps others watching internationally would think. I do think the administration and President Trump is ready and desires a deal at this point. When you watch them closely from here in Washington and interact with them, I think they feel like they've set back the Iranian nuclear program significantly. And I do think that they're ready for a deal. That's my sense of watching them.
So, Tim, you say there's understanding, but then why did we see all over the press President Trump saying to Israel, you're going to blow this, when it came to reporting on Israel continuing to attack Lebanon and not listening to what the administration wanted?
Friends and allies can disagree and still remain close friends and allies, understanding that the situation for one ally is different than for the other ally. I would not take those kind of statements from President Trump. He is, he tends to be emotive. He tends to, sometimes fly aggressively in conversations and in describing people. That's his nature, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of Americans like and respect about him. While he's doing that, it's very important to understand that he still remembers who key allies and friends are and the unique situation they're facing in their center of operation, their area of operation. So, two things can be true at the same time. The president can want a deal. He can hope that Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu are moving along together, but he can understand that at key moments they're going to need to take action in what is the national interest of Israel and protecting the people in their state, because they have been repeatedly attacked here. Let's remember, this all started with the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. That's crucial to remember.
Okay, I'm not sure.
I think it goes a bit longer than that.
There's a lot of components here.
Yes,
It's hard to. Yeah, let me ask Elham though. About
the latest round.
Okay, let me ask Elham about Israel and Lebanon then. And Elham, Minister Ben-Gvir says Israel is this deal, he said, quote, does not bind Israel. So let me ask you from this kind of perspective, should Iran compromise here? Because some also argue that this is Lebanon's battle for its government to negotiate with Israel and the U.S., not for Iran to decide. Where will Iran be able to compromise there, if at all?
Well, it's interesting that in American political discourse, when you're talking about America and Israel, you would call them friends and allies. And then when it comes to Iran and Hezbollah and other resistance groups in the region, they call them proxies and they talk about Iran's control on them. So why not use the same language and call it friends and allies? So as the United States and Israel are supposed to act in a way that normal friends and allies would act, I think the same goes for Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. And I think Iranians have come to this conclusion, whether it's the politicians or even the people, that when in the case of Israel, any step that you take back, any step you take towards peace, the Israelis are going to just, come further and attack you. So the situation here is one in which that for decades, Israel has been occupying Palestinian land, occupying parts of Lebanon. Right now, they are occupying a big chunk of southern Lebanon. They have displaced about 1 million people. They have destroyed their villages and towns. We're seeing the images every day on our social media, so it's not something that you cannot ignore or dismiss. And then, holding Hezbollah responsible for fighting back for their country, for their homeland, I think that's something that would not be very much rational. So in Iran, I think many people are convinced that it's going to be Israel that's going to sooner or later break this ceasefire and again start attacking, whether it's in Lebanon or even in Iran itself. And I think we have to have this in mind, that this is not just confined to Netanyahu or Ben-Gvir or members of the current ruling coalition in Israel. According to polls that we have from Israel, the majority of the Israeli population are for more attacks and occupation in Lebanon. And so this is not confined to just one political group. It's a more serious issue. It goes a bit back to the actual aggressive nature that the Israeli regime has. And things do not go back to the 7th of October. Of course, there's a long history of occupation and of displacement of people. There's a long history of prejudice against people in this region. And you have this level of people feeling that their rights are not respected in any way, and the only option they see and they have seen for a couple of decades is to fight back. I think that's the reality of this region.
Emad, let me get your take on that then, because Tim says friends can disagree, which he believes is what we're seeing between Trump and Netanyahu right now. But how much will President Trump actually let Benjamin Netanyahu get away with when it comes to adhering to whatever deal the U.S. signs on to?
I mean, if the most important thing is U.S. national security and its relationship and its foreign policy in the Middle East, it doesn't just include Israel. It includes its other allies and friends that are the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, and others, who have been at the receiving end of this, war of choice that Netanyahu dragged the U.S. into and brought about this complete disaster in every measure we can look at. So I think that when you look at the situation, while there is maybe some, disagreements between Israel and the United States, the bottom line is that Israel cannot continue its aggressive policies in Lebanon, in Palestine, across the region, including on Iran, without a direct and complete green light from Washington. Those weapon systems, those aeroplanes, those trainings, those intelligence gatherings and cooperation are all tied to United States. So therefore, US has a great deal of tools to put pressure and stop Netanyahu and the Israeli government from continuing or derailing this deal. It can. It takes a phone call. And I believe that Trump has that power to do so if the pressure points are not just limited to, let's say, one or two parties. The world is impacted by this war. The Middle Eastern countries, close allies of the US, the major buyers of US military and other security apparatus, are watching this deal unfolding and realizing that this is the only way they can secure their national interests when it comes to, if this derails, where's Iran going to hit in addition to Israel? We've seen what they've done to just across the Persian Gulf on UAE infrastructure, in Bahrain, in Kuwait. And mind you, US has enormous amount of footprint of military bases across the region that is in the reach of Iran. So I think if we want to really look at this honestly and say that what is in the interest of the US, economically, politically, geostrategically, it needs this deal maybe more than anybody else.
Let me ask Tim quickly, because there is another point of pressure here on the Trump administration, and that is the economy. So how much leeway do you think President Trump actually has to play with in the Strait of Hormuz, which is really Iran's major source of leverage here?
Yeah, that's a great question. The election cycle in November, when the entire House of Representatives and about roughly a third of the U.S. Senate will be up, that is important to the White House, to the Republican Party. There's no question about that. And this conflict has impacted the economy, the American economy, as it's impacted the Iranian and really the world. So that is a pressure point. Two thoughts, though. One, and I want to go back to your guest for just a moment. Anyone who thinks that President Trump can be duped or dragged into something, they don't know President Trump. I've seen him up close. I've met him. I've watched his administration closely. It's laughable to think that some other leader is going to drag him into a conflict he did not think was best for the United States. So that's not the case here. With regard to the economy and how it's going to impact the Trump decision making, they've shown a specific patience with this effort. They've not just rushed to sign some agreement, the Trump administration. They've shown patience here, and I think they'll continue to do so. Remember, it's only June. It's June, the middle June, June 15. The election's not until November. American voters move quickly with their thought processes. So the idea that there's a deal that desperately needs to be made because of an election by the end of June or July, I think they're missing just how fast the election cycle goes in the United States. So there are months and months here to work with.
There are months and months, Tim, you can say that, but the U.S. economy and the average American is struggling at this point. I mean, let me check. I want to go to Tehran with a similar question as well, Elham, because we're hearing analysts say the same about Iran, that the economy is under so much immense pressure, but some will argue Iran, because of its experience under sanctions, can hold out somehow longer than the United States, and there is no upcoming election.
Yeah, well, Iran has been under economic pressure for many, many years. You could even say decades. We have been facing American sanctions. They would like to call them crippling sanctions, affecting ordinary people's lives. And, things have been not in a normal situation in terms of when you talk about the Iranian economy. But on the other hand, the Iranian people know and understand that we are living in an era of war. We have been attacked by America and Israel, America, which claims to be the superpower, and Israel claims to be the strongest military in the region, and we are withstanding that. So if you, look at the cost-benefit analysis that people are making in their minds, it's that, we have been able to withstand this attack. Our territorial integrity has been under threat. If you remember, in the beginning of this war, Trump was speaking about changing the map of Iran. He was speaking about, destroying our whole civilization. And when people in Iran, of course, we are undergoing economic pressure, but people do not only consider this aspect. They see that we have been able to withstand all these threats of destruction of our civilization, of changing of our map. So it's a kind of there's a sense of pride among the Iranian people, although we are going through economic hardship. And it's very different for the Americans when you see that, for them, it's a war. It was a war of choice. I mean, they could have not started this war. They made the decision to start the war. We didn't do that. We didn't have a decision. We had to defend our country. So I think it's a totally different kind of perspective when you see. And still we have, the people, the demonstrators that have been on the streets from the first night that this attack on our country happened. Every night we see the people, still it's happening. And, these people are also very cautious, and they're kind of sending this message to politicians that we do not want a deal or a peace on any terms. We want a good deal. We want one that ensures and guarantees our rights. So I think, from the Iranian perspective, the story is quite a bit different. That there are so many other factors other than just the economic situation that people consider.
Kiyaei, would you agree there? And also, if you can, I think we do need to factor in a little bit of pride and ego and what role they play in getting a deal. Do you see a potential here for egos to potentially undo all of this because both sides are so firmly claiming victory?
I mean, egos play great parts. I mean, we're talking about Trump and a millennial-old civilization that is not going to budge down to threats. But at the same time, I think that it can play a positive role in actually reaching a point where both sides can claim victory. This is not a zero-sum game. And this is, I think, one of the most important outcomes of this devastating war, is that no one side can get everything they wanted. Actually, if we look at it, the US and Israel have not achieved maybe any of their strategic goals that they came in with for this war. So in the end of the day, I think the economic pressure, the political pressure, the destruction of US trust by other regional countries for its security in the long term has been devastated. I think here, while we want to forget that this war started while US and Iran were negotiating in Geneva, where I was actually in the sidelines of, and they had reached an understanding to wrap this whole thing up without a war. And a day after, the war began. So it shows that wars will not achieve the political aims of the aggressor. It doesn't provide a way forward in terms of if you want to go in with it with zero-sum understanding. And ultimately, if both sides can show that to some part, in the case of the Trump administration, the reopening of Hormuz, even though it will still be under some form of management of the Iranians and Omanis. In terms of stabilizing the oil markets, well, okay, fine, thanks, after you've messed it up in the first place. But I think the cost that will be seen across many years to come is that these regional allies of the U.S. are going to look at themselves and say, can we trust the U.S. to provide us security?
Okay.
Or is it time for for the region to actually sit down together and come up with a regional security apparatus that doesn't exist today, that exists in other regions of the world, where they decided ultimately that they need to bring their own security into their own beholder.
Okay, and Emad, my apologies. I think I created a hybrid of your name just a minute ago when I came to you. But quick then, Tim, we have 1 minute left, so let me just get your final thoughts on where you think this peace deal is going.
I do think there will be a memorandum of understanding. I think both sides at this point are more open to a deal. I do think it's important to note the American people have seen the true nature of this Iranian regime. They know the truth, and the denials don't work. They know this regime killed tens of thousands of its own people. They see the nature of it. They understand and are patient with what's going on. But I do think there'll be a memorandum of understanding very soon. The world knows the truth. They saw it.
Okay, we're unfortunately going to have to.
The truth is the death of the children in Minab that were in a terrorist attack were killed by the American attack. 168 children that were killed in Minab school. Yes.
Unfortunately,
and you can search their names. It's verifiable.
Has seen the truth.
We're going to have to leave it there, very unfortunately. So I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for being with us, our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media. Do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We will see you next time.